Well, we're coming up on the midway point of the Major League Soccer season as we're joined by the voice of Charlotte FC as they are the team up next on Austin FC's schedule. Eric Krakauer, great to have you with us. Again, the greatest of all time TV play-by-play voice of Charlotte FC, if I'm remembering correctly. Is that right?
That is 100% correct. Great to be on, by the way.
Yeah, congratulations to Charlotte after a long wait, finally having Major League Soccer arrive. We obviously know that feeling from a year ago as the 27th team in Major League Soccer, preceding Charlotte at 28. Your story is the typical one, a kid from Portugal who rises to become the English language voice of an American soccer franchise. Let's dive into that. What stands out when you think about your childhood and your upbringing and how it may have differed a little bit from the rest of a lot of us?
Oh man, you are definitely trying to bore your audience. I can tell. Well, wow. I mean, it's a long story. Listen, to cut it short, I was born and grew up in Portugal. I moved to England when I was 16 to finish my education. I was distracted by social things, and so I didn't do particularly well in my last 2 years of high school, which are really important, or were really important at that time in England in order to get into a good university. My brother, who was in New York City, a doctor, suggested that I move to New York and try to use soccer to get into college, which is more or less what happened. 4 years in college, 3 playing soccer, and when I graduated, I went into teaching. I became a public school teacher. Didn't want to leave New York City. I fell in love with the city. I found myself having a lot of free time, and I started writing about soccer, and that's where it all kicked off.
One of the teams you got to eventually write about was an expansion side in New York City FC. Did you pull from that experience, watching that team build from scratch to what you're experiencing now in Charlotte FC?
You know what? Maybe subconsciously, but I haven't done it consciously, that's for sure. At the time, to be completely honest, I started covering the Red Bulls, and then I moved on. I didn't move on. I started covering NYCFC as well during their expansion year. But at that point in time, I never thought that I would have a career in soccer. I was just doing it on the side. It was a way to go to games for free. People were reading my work. I got a little bit of respect, and I would get invited to go on Sirius Radio to talk about MLS, but because I was Portuguese, to talk about the Portuguese national team and Portuguese soccer. So for me, it was just a hobby at the time. So I didn't really pay that much attention to the expansion aspect of NYCFC. I was more focused on how they were playing, how well the players were doing, and just enjoying the moment. I wasn't the most professional person writing about the Red Bulls and NYCFC, but I took advantage of the fact that there was very little coverage of those teams in New York City. And at the time, I mean, people often forget how quickly Major League Soccer has grown in the last, 5-6 years. It's been transformational. And at that time, nationally, you didn't really get, or MLS didn't really get a lot of attention in the newspapers and in paper publications. It was mostly online. So I capitalized on that.
Of course, in the front office for NYCFC was a guy named Claudio Reyna. On the pitch for him, some Finnish kid named Alex Ring, 2 people we've never heard from since.
Nope.
But again, talking to Eric Krakauer, who would later make his way down to Florida and work his way into the broadcasting realm. You mentioned that you got some experience behind a microphone as a guest, as a reporter talking about soccer. When was the first time you actually put the headset on to call a live event?
Well, just it was really a stroke of luck. During my few appearances on Sirius XM, a couple of people would approach me and say, you enjoy it, you know what you're talking about. Have you ever considered doing a podcast? In fact, a guy who used to be a producer at Sirius who covered the Red Bulls was the person who pushed me in that direction. So I started a podcast, and it just so happened that one of the frequent listeners was a producer at beIN Sports. So he reached out to me, and I thought it was a joke initially because he did it through Instagram. And he said, listen, I really enjoy your podcast. I'm hiring a producer. You are not qualified in any way, shape, or form to take this job, but I think that I can convince the brass to bring you on. You sort of focus on learning as much as you can about TV production, and your soccer knowledge will sort of allow you to swim for now, so you don't sink. So that's what happened. I went there, and this is where the luck kicks in. One of the nights where I'm staying late at beIN Sports, it was about 8:30 at night, if I recall correctly. Hardly anybody was in the building. That producer was, and he gets a call that one of his commentators, the color commentator, who was Matteo Bonetti, who is now with CBS doing Calcio, got sick, got ill, and there was a game that was kicking off at 10 o'clock. It was an NASL game between Indy 11 and Edmonton, and the play-by-play guy asked if there was somebody who could come in and do color. The play-by-play guy was Chris Whittingham, who does radio for Inter Miami and is on the Dan Le Batard show. And the producer sort of instinctively turned towards me and he said, "Do you think you can call a game on national TV in about an hour?" And, I said, yes, instinctively as well.
That's
And
always the correct answer.
it is always the correct answer. I did okay to the point where another producer noticed. And at the time they had, it continues to be the case. beIN Canada, beIN Sports, and beIN Sports Espanol. This producer was in charge of beIN Canada. And he said, "Listen, I'm going to start using you to do some voiceover work." And from there, things just got rolling. I ended my career as a producer. I was actually laid off because they were cutting some producers. And the guy, Rafa Torres, who ran the channel, asked me if I'd be interested in doing broadcasting for beIN Sports. And here I am. I mean, it's just it is not the normal story. And I pinch myself every day. I'm very fortunate to be where I am.
Yeah, I tell individuals, if you want to be a doctor, you do well in school, you take an exam, you do well, you go to a new school, you take an exam, you do well, you're a doctor. Same thing with an architect, same thing with an attorney. If you want to be a sports broadcaster and you do every single thing that your favorite sports broadcaster does, you're going to wind up on the exact opposite end of the realm from where they wind up. No two paths are the same, which is why I always enjoy chatting with individuals, not just around Major League Soccer, but just throughout the profession. So, I mean, if you want to raise a child in Portugal, I don't see any reason not to discourage people from doing that. But no guarantee they're going to wind up being the first ever voice of an expansion side in Major League Soccer. Obviously, bilingual. I know you've called games in Portuguese. Are you more often talking about soccer in Portuguese that pertains to Portugal or to Brazil?
To Portugal. To Portugal. And in fact, when I was invited to call games in Portuguese for CONMEBOL, the footballing federation in South America, I knew that I was going to be calling games in Portuguese for Brazil. The Portuguese is different. So there's different vocabulary even in soccer. Just the goals have different names. The actual structure of the goal has a different name. Corner kicks have different names. The grass has a different name. So I was a little reluctant at first, but they really pushed me to do it. I learned the Brazilian vernacular and enjoyed it. Doing South American football, a lot of South American football, a lot of European football, and even J League for them. But it was certainly a learning process, and actually one that improved my own commentary in English.
A lot of what we do is about the rhythm. It's more than just knowing the sport you're covering, but how to deliver that in a way that just happens to work with the pictures on TV or on radio, at times creating your own momentum. Is there a different rhythm for you when you call a game in one language as opposed to another? Are you mindful of those differences?
Yeah, 100%. Although saying that, when at beIN Sports, I started as a color commentator. And then I was given an opportunity to do play-by-play because Kevin Egan left the network and went to Atlanta. As you know, play-by-play voice of Atlanta United, one of the voices for WWE, and he was at CNN at the time as well. And so they needed somebody to slot in, and I did. And one of the things that I was cognizant of was that because I didn't have much of a resume, or not at all, in soccer commentary. And if I wanted to pursue this career, if I wanted to make a name for myself, I needed to be slightly different than the other commentators that I knew. So I studied the people that I worked with very closely, including Kevin, Dre Cordero, Phil Shane. But I wanted to make sure that I also used the experience of listening to commentary in Portugal, the experience of learning the more Brazilian way, and tons of South American commentators at beIN Sports. So I would listen to their commentary as well. And I tried to sort of thread a needle between all those commentaries to create something that was more of my own. And that has and continues to be a little bit of an experiment, but ultimately staying true to myself. So to answer your original question, originally the rhythm was different when I commentated in Portuguese, but slowly over time they have sort of melded together.
Perfect. Well, I just got done listening to your last game, of course, against Montreal, as Austin's prior opponent before FC Dallas was your most recent opponent. So I know your coaching staff has seen plenty of Austin on tape as of late. Let's dive into it. Of course, Charlotte FC right now, you're already in the future. You're already in the second half of the season now as of this match. You already have 17 under your belt, 6 wins, 9 losses, a pair of draws. For comparison, last year, Austin, compared to your 20 points, just had 16 points halfway through the season, 4, 9, and 4. So Charlotte overall has to be pretty pleased, I'd imagine, big picture of where you are as an expansion side who, oh, by the way, made a coaching change in the middle of the season. Just let's go back to when you were hired. How much of this roster was even in place when you were officially named the voice of the team?
Not much. Not much. I think they had the back line was pretty solid and concrete. The center of the park, the center midfielders were in, but it was really lacking wingers and forwards. Swiderski came in. Daniel Rios was a late acquisition. In fact, I think he was signed 2 days before their inaugural game against DC United, and he featured in that game. So it was very much a work in progress, but I believed at the time, and I continue to believe, that the backbone was there for a successful team. And some of the players who had already signed were players I was very familiar with because I called so much South American football at beIN Sports. Titi Ortiz, Guzman Corujo, and the like, Alan Franco, who just moved to Talleres on loan. So I almost felt like it was kismet that I was meant to be at Charlotte because I was so familiar with those players. But gradually, as we've all seen, they've started really adding to that backbone, and now you have a pretty large roster, actually.
Despite the large roster, your trip to Canada, you all were down. It seemed like almost half a squad. Now, you mentioned you just had the transfer out. You have a couple of individuals who already had their season cut short, including your first ever goal scorer on the year in Adam Armour. But of the guys who are out for health and safety protocol, I know the team had petitioned even not to play that game when it was initially scheduled. How much of that was actual concerns currently with the health and safety protocol as opposed to what could happen if something went wrong north of the border?
Well, I don't know what was being told or said behind closed doors. I wasn't privy to that. I would assume, and I heard a rumor that one of the main concerns was obviously if another player would test positive in Canada, he'd be stuck there. You'd have to quarantine for a couple of weeks. And with the quick turnaround with Austin coming in on Thursday, that was on the minds of everybody. So that was the main concern. And of course, you also have to consider that, you have a new coach who beat the Red Bulls and then had a tough draw in Columbus, a third game, and he's now being dealt this long list of absentees, which was more problematic because most of the players played in similar positions. So there were no wingers in Montreal, and very few forwards as well. So, it was a bit of bad luck, and they almost managed to get a point there at Stade Saputo.
Yeah, it was encouraging in that first half, despite going down an early goal, as a team that bounced right back and was able to land its own opening punch to tie things up early, only to see that draw turn into a loss in the second half. Just in general, you're the first commentary team, you along with Lloyd Sam, along with your production team. How much thought has gone into setting the tone and building the identity, at least from a broadcast standpoint, for a brand new club?
I think the work continues. There was a lot of talk between us and the commentary team, which also includes Katie Witham, and the production team. But also when I was, a candidate for the position and I was interviewing with the front office, that was a question I asked. How do you want me to discuss the team? What are the limits of my criticism, if there needs to be some criticism? And really, for the most part, they said, you call it the way you see it, right? And that was the message I think Lloyd Sam got as well. And at times when we call a game, Lloyd and I always watch the game on the Monday or Tuesday after it's been played, so that when we have a meeting, we go over the things that we liked and the things that we didn't like. And at times, either I said to Lloyd or Lloyd said to me, maybe we're a little bit too harsh about that point, or maybe we weren't harsh enough. So it's a constant refinement of the work that we're doing here. Insofar as an identity itself, I don't really know how to answer that question. All that I can say is that we're true to how we feel about what we're seeing, and we try to give our listeners the most accurate portrayal of what we are taking in, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. You and Lloyd obviously wear separate hats on the broadcast. You're the driver, you're doing the play-by-play, he's providing the analysis, but obviously you're capable in your own right. You've even mentioned in the past you have been a color commentator, a color analyst, because in part you can lean on your playing career that took you up through college. How often do you find yourself cutting yourself off, editing yourself in the midst of a broadcast to make sure you're not stepping on what he can elaborate on, even though you're capable of giving a little bit more color to the broadcast?
Not at all. Not at all. Interestingly enough, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your rear end here. Lloyd and I see the game very similarly, and there are plenty of times where I say something and he'll tell me on air, you can hear this in the game, that's exactly what I was thinking, or I was just about to say that, and vice versa. However, I'm aware that I'm the play-by-play commentator and he's the analyst, so I stay in my lane for the most part. It's an interesting question for me, because ultimately what underscores the question is, what are the distinctive roles of the two commentators doing a broadcast, right? I think that one of the great liberties that American commentators have is that there isn't necessarily a delineated path that must be followed when you're talking about commentators. I know that there is a preference for the old school English commentary style, where the play-by-play is in complete control and the color commentator comes in bits and pieces. But I think that's slowly changing. And when we were bringing Lloyd on board, one of the first discussions we had, we were both in Miami, so we met, was about how interested we both were in maybe, coloring outside the lines a little bit, making the broadcast a little different. Whether we've succeeded in doing that, I don't know. I think the listeners will have to determine that. Where, yes, I'm the play-by-play, but he and I can have a discussion about the things that we're seeing, almost like we'd be discussing it, within reason at a bar or at home. So it's something that I think about a lot, but ultimately, at the end of the day, he's the analyst and I'm the play-by-play commentator.
Walk me through, as we focus again here on Charlotte FC, talking to Eric Krakauer, TV voice for Charlotte. Your three designated players, Jozwiak, Alcivar, and of course Shinyashiki, who's I think been the headliner of the group. Just what you think attracted them to Charlotte, and how this first season's going so far.
Well, I can't really speak for them. I know that Shinyashiki said on record that it was a goal of his to come to the United States. Having a designated player contract certainly doesn't hurt. I also believe that a lot of players, and I'm sure you agree as well, that a lot of players, especially younger ones, see Major League Soccer as a stepping stone for a bigger league in Europe. I do know that Shinyashiki had offers from Serie A, which he turned down, so he really wanted to be here. But if you look at somebody like Jordi Alcivar, um, and how well he did in Liga Quito, he probably had the opportunity to play in Europe, but saw that coming to MLS, to a team that had lofty ambitions, was a gateway to a bigger team in the old continent. So I think there's a little bit of that too. I haven't had an opportunity to really speak to József, so I don't really know what his motivations were. But I do know that he was really looking forward to coming to Major League Soccer.
Another guy, Andre Shinyashiki, midseason acquisition. Austin's familiar with him. He scored the first goal in their first meeting with Colorado last year, which would prove to be the first ever victory in Austin's history in their comeback effort. But I feel like Andre is making himself right at home there in Charlotte, helping contribute to your 17 goal total this year.
Yeah, I think he was a missing piece. Just his dynamism, also his work rate up and down his lane, and his nose for goal, which has been obvious to anybody who's been watching Charlotte FC. He's hit the crossbar once or twice already. Besides scoring 3 goals in league and 1 in the U.S. Open Cup. And one of the things that I really like about him, and Lloyd Sam has actually uttered this as well in broadcast, is that he seems to play with a chip on his shoulder. And that was a quality that I don't think we saw in Charlotte before his arrival. So he's been an added ingredient that has spiced things up. It's been a really successful move, and I know he's feeling at home here.
So you all are back at home, and that is a big home for now, as you all share with the Panthers, as well as an ownership group with the Panthers. What was it like calling a match in front of in excess of 74,000 fans?
Well, unfortunately,
I know it's a national broadcast, pardon me,
yeah.
But being in that atmosphere.
It was incredible. I've had the opportunity of being in a lot of stadiums around the world, and I'm not lying when I say it was the best experience I've had at a soccer game. There was something celebratory about the atmosphere, and for good reason, right? They were celebrating the first ever home game, and it almost felt, and of course I'm saying this now, I probably wouldn't have said it at that moment, that the result didn't really matter. As long as the team played hard, what mattered was that everybody was together at the culmination of this 2 to 3 year project in Charlotte. And so you had that feeling, you had that electricity, and of course you had the incredible moment of the sound system basically falling apart during the national anthem, and everybody almost, and I'm using this word for the third time here with you, instinctively jumping in and singing the national anthem. And now it's become ritualized in every home game. It was just, it was an unbelievable experience. My 3-year-old, my whole family was there. My whole family, my fiance, my 2 kids, at the time, my 6-month-old and my 3-year-old daughter, and my mother, who came from Portugal to visit and had the opportunity to be there. And my daughter now asks me to go to home games all the time. And what has been quite remarkable is that even with 30,000 people, 30, 32, 33,000 people, with that upper bowl completely empty, the atmosphere hasn't changed that much. Of course, it's not the same. It never will be. That was the first game ever. But it really is a party atmosphere. And it's continued. And it's impressive to see. I think MLS hit the jackpot in giving Charlotte this MLS team.
Yeah, several friends.
Austin, sorry to cut you off. I mean, Austin is the same.
Yeah.
Actually, watching Austin last season, I remember thinking, wow. I mean, Austin has really amazed the league. I'm sure that there are a lot of cities out there thinking, if we can replicate what Austin is doing, we've hit the jackpot.
Yeah, I have various people from my life who call Charlotte home now, and inevitably on social media, there they are posting pictures with their family wearing Charlotte FC gear at a match. I'm sure anybody who knows anybody in Austin by now has seen them acquire a lot more green in their wardrobe in a similar manner. Looking forward to this one, Austin FC, Charlotte FC, as West and East teams collide. It'll be the 18th match of the year for Charlotte, who sits in 9th right now in the East. It'll be the start of the second half, or pardon me, the end of the first half, the 17th match for Austin, as we are midway through here, season number 2. Remind us where fans in Charlotte and the greater Carolinas area can find your broadcast on Thursday.
You shouldn't have asked me that question because I don't know which channel this game is actually gonna be on. But it's one of two. WSOC I think might be carrying this, but anybody can watch on the Charlotte Football Club .com website. You can stream the game, and of course you can listen on radio as well.
Yeah, notice those call letters of WSOC. Is that South Carolina related, or do they just love soccer that much in the greater Carolinas?
So WSOC, if I'm not mistaken, my goodness, I'm going to get massacred for this, is North Carolina. So there are lots of affiliates all over the Carolinas that are showing the games, and I could not number all of them.
No worries. This is where I tell you I'll edit it out, and yet I have no intention of editing all this out.
You don't need to. You don't need to.
A reminder that Adrian Healy, Michael Lahoud will have the Austin FC English language call on KBVO. It is going to be a 7 p.m. Eastern kick. It'll be a 6 p.m. Central Time kick. So that means that a 5:30 pregame show with Adrian, Michael, along with their Spanish colleagues as well, and Roger Valdivieso, as well as Sonny Guadarrama, all have the radio call over on Alt 97.5 starting at 6 o'clock on Thursday. You can stream that live as well on the iHeartRadio app. Eric, congratulations. What an incredible opportunity. A great place to be there in Charlotte with your young family. I hope you're enjoying the ride. I know it's a little disappointing that already time has flown and you're halfway through this maiden voyage for Charlotte FC. Yeah. But all the best here in the second half, at least after you get past Thursday.
Thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to seeing Austin here. I really like the football that they play. I know Felipe Martins, one of the players, decently well when I covered the Red Bulls, an old teammate of Lloyd Sams. So that's going to be a great reunion there. So hoping for a good result, but hoping for a better match. And I think that's exactly what we're going to get Thursday night.
Again, that's Eric Krakauer. Yeah, your TV language voice for Charlotte FC. Absolutely, Eric. Enjoy getting a chance to chat with all the voices around Major League Soccer. It's Austin FC, Charlotte FC, again, this Thursday in Charlotte at a stadium that holds about 75,000. Expect a crowd, maybe around 30,000. But it should be a fantastic atmosphere for that 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern kick. Eric, again, appreciate it.